Hey everyone, welcome back to the course. So in this project-based lesson, we're going to create this water flowing into a glass effect from start to finish, including rendering and post-production in After Effects. So this is one of the animations that I rendered out as part of the promo for the course. So you might have seen this already. And this was another angle. I was just going for the slow motion look. Try to make the water look as photoreal as possible. So I've already prepared the scene here. So this was actually my original scene that I used to render this out. But I'm going to delete this because we're going to set it up from scratch. So let me delete the emitter as well. So basically what you should start with is something along these lines. I have a basic glass model that I made and then this super basic bottle. I knew that I was never going to actually show the bottle, so it's just something to make the water come out of. I do think that it's important though, because a lot of times what I see is somebody will just put an emitter right above the glass and just sort of have the water flow in this completely perfect uniform stream straight into the glass. It will be much more interesting of a shot if you model a simple bottle like this, or just get one from online and have the water flow out of this bottle, because then what you get is this nice realistic looking stream with this curvature and some nice detail and everything, which is something you wouldn't get if you were to just put a cylindrical emitter above the glass. So again, as always, this is going to get repetitive, but I need to remind you that I'm working in units, centimeters. 1 unit is 1 centimeter. And this is scaled roughly to real world scale. So if I make a box just to measure things real quick, this glass is about 15 centimeters high. So a pretty tall glass. I actually made it taller just to get it closer to the bottle. Just so that the liquid wouldn't splash over. What I initially started with was something more along the lines of this, and then I ended up raising it up just to catch all of the liquid. So that's something you can play with. So let's go right into setting up Phoenix. So let's do again creation panel of Phoenix, liquid sim, and let's make our simulation box. So this might be a good example to show you the cascade simulation where we would use 2 simulation boxes. But since this is still one of the introductory lessons, let's just use one grid and I'll show you how to use the cascade simulation in a later example. So let's go under grid and just make sure that the entire simulation area is covered. For the resolution, again, I'm gonna get up to a decent number of particles here, so maybe around 2 million, just so we can see what is happening. And then let's go under the standard primitives and let's make a cylinder. And I'm going pretty fast here because we've already gone over how to set the beginner steps here. If you are confused, be sure to go back to revisit some of the earlier lessons. Let's just convert this cylinder into an editable poly. We've done this before, and let's make this polygon ID 10 because we are only going to emit the liquid out of this bottom polygon, and then we can hit Control I and make the remaining polygon some other number, so maybe 5. And I can select the bottle and hit Alt X to make it semi-transparent and move the cylinder roughly where I want the liquid to be emitted. So basically we're just faking that the bottle is full of liquid. We are basically emitting the liquid into the bottle, and then it's flowing out of the bottle into the glass. And that's just to get that nice liquid look of it flowing out of this opening area here. So let's make sure that it's kind of in the middle like this, and then we can go under helpers, Phoenix, and create a liquid source. I'm going to make the outgoing velocity around 40, which I remember worked pretty well. And let's add the cylinder. And before we forget, let's set the polygon ID to 10. So again, the liquid is only coming out of this bottom polygon. And I think I raised the noise to about 0.3 just to add a little bit more variation in the liquid, some difference in flow, and have it broken up a bit more as it's flowing. So with that set up, let's go under the dynamics. And one thing I wanted to tell you is I almost always do liquid simulations in slow motion. Very rarely will you ever see in a commercial or anything like that a simulation in real time, because what makes liquids beautiful is when you see them in slow-mo. So I would recommend, I almost always make the time scale maybe 0.25, which is 1/4 of real-time speed, or more often I will actually make it 0.1, which is 1/10 of the speed. So this example here is 1/4. I think that it would actually look even better if it was 1/10. Usually the more slow-mo these simulations are, the more satisfying and attractive they look. So that's just a general tip. For the steps per frame, I would probably do 2. So generally speaking, as you lower time scale, you don't need as many steps per frame because the simulation is already slowed down. If you were simulating this in real time, I would say definitely make this maybe 8 or 12. But since we'll be doing probably 0.2, 1 or 2 steps per frame is actually plenty to get you all of the detail that you need. All of the other settings we'll leave at default because we're just doing standard water. And then under output, as always, select your output folder. And as always, let's output velocity, even though for these slow motion shots, I never render them with motion blur because motion blur will just make them look fast again. And also it's kind of weird to see a slow motion footage with motion blur. It wouldn't really happen in real life, or there would be very little motion blur. I do enable it just in case I want it later, but we're not gonna render this with motion blur. So with everything set up, we can just go under simulation and hit start and make sure that this is working. All right, so I've simulated this for 200 frames. Let's hit Alt X again to make this semi-transparent. As you can see, it's working pretty well. The resolution is pretty low, so I'm able to just scrub through this in real time. One habit that I want to get you into, if you're not doing that already, is always creating previews before you render anything. The last thing you want to do is commit time and rendering resources into rendering this in final quality only to find out that the liquid is moving too fast or too slow. So always hit Shift V, which is the shortcut to create a new preview, or you can just go on the tools, create preview animation. Make sure you set this visual style to standard. Percent output, you can do 100, and the range we can do from 0 to 199. And for the file type, I think this was fixed in Max 2020. I'm still in Max 2019, so you might have more options here. But basically, I always do JPEG and just make like a preview folder and name this preview underscore save. Okay, and just create a preview real quick and then open it in After Effects and play it in real time just to make sure that it's actually as fast and slow as you would expect, because the simulations can be deceiving. You're scrubbing through it in Max and you think that everything's looking good. More often than not, I'm in for a surprise, and usually it's faster than I think it will be. So let's finish this preview. All right, so I imported the preview into After Effects, so I know for sure that this will be the fine speed at which it will play once I render it out. I think it's not too fast, not too slow. I actually really like this. I think it's kind of elegant and it's a nice little water pour into a glass. I love this effect here and everything. So let's just say that we're happy with this and let's move forward. Now that I'm happy with how everything is behaving, I would go under grid and I would increase the resolution again. You can go as high as you want in these cases. I know that I'm gonna go pretty close with the camera, so I think I actually did around 40 million total cells, 0.07 centimeter cell size. It might sound like it's going to take forever to sim, but it still took only about an hour, which is nothing, especially considering how beautiful the final simulation is. So it's really very fast when you think about it. So, don't be afraid to crank the settings up. If you want a more pronounced slow motion effect, you can go back under dynamics, maybe make the timescale 0.1. I will leave that up to you and just run the simulation through. So let's just pretend that we've done that. Everything is simulated. So now rendering is the only remaining portion of this. So I've already prepared some lights. I'm going to unhide all. I already have some standard V-Ray lights. I showed you in the previous lesson how I make those. I showed you how to make the rendering studio, so it's the same thing, except in this case I made it this shiny blue material. So you can just make the glossiness 0.8, make the reflection kind of white-ish, and that will give you this nice reflective blue background, which will also reflect in the water. And now you can just sort of decide where you want to put your camera. So I think I put the camera very close to the glass, but I don't want to see the bottle. So actually what I did was I clicked on the bottle, go to object properties, and I made it not renderable. So even though it's in the frame, I will not see it. And you can hit Control-C to create a new camera. So you can see up here it switched from perspective to camera. And you can hit Alt-W to get outside of that viewport again. So here's our camera that we just created. I like to set the target distance to about the middle here, because what I like to do is animate the camera to pan a little bit. You always want to add movement whenever you can to make things more interesting. So I'm going to set auto key, set keyframe, and then maybe go to that frame 180, and you can switch this to local for the movement here for the axis, and move the camera a little bit to the side. So now it's sort of turning, and we can't really see the liquid up here. So let's select Phoenix, turn off auto key, go to preview, say show mesh, and don't show the particles. So now we can see what this will look like with the camera movement. So again, the liquid is pretty low res, but we will fix that once we run the final simulation. And again, under rendering, you can increase the smoothness to about 5 to smooth it out. That helped a lot. Let's set up the Z depth before we do the materials. So as you can see in my example, I have some shallow depth of field. The background here is getting blurred while the water is in focus, and the foreground here is getting blurred as well. So we have some extreme close-up shallow depth of field going on. So the way to do that is to select the camera and just look at the target distance. So I know that I want the point that is in focus should be about 10 centimeters far, and then it should go from about 5.5, because that's here on the edge of the glass, all the way to maybe 15, which is the other edge of the glass. So the area that I'm defining is the area of the focus, which I'll be able to control later in After Effects to pick which point I want to be focused and which point I want to be out of focus. So what you would do is go under Render Elements, Add, and select the V-Ray Z depth, and then scroll down. And for the Z depth minimum, we set around 5.5, and for the Z depth maximum, we're gonna say 15. So now we're gonna get a perfect Z depth pass to get this kind of an effect, and I'll show that to you in a bit in After Effects. For the rendering settings, I'm using the exact same ones as I showed you in the previous lesson, so nothing changes here. And for the resolution, I did full HD, but again, that's up to you. So now let's just set up the materials. So for the glass, I'm doing the same glass material that I showed you in the last lesson as well. So that's pretty simple, and you can just hit Alt X and Alt X again to show the actual material. So let's make both of them glass. And for the water, again, I'm using the standard water material that I showed you before. So black for diffuse, white reflection, white refraction, 1.3 for IOR, and you can just apply that material to the Phoenix grid. So everything basically disappeared. Let's make sure that the cylinder is not renderable. And we can do etched faces just so we can see where everything is. Let's do etched faces here too, so everything is in frame. And at this point, you can just select the active time segment or the range of the frames you want to render and render it out. So let's just render out one frame to make sure that this is working. All right, so everything is working fine. As before, you can turn on the V-Ray IPR to see how things are looking in real time. And then you can change the color of the background if you would like to, maybe orange or white or black, to get some different looks. You know, you can play with the colors of the lights. You can add more lights. I'll leave that up to you. So basically, after I rendered everything out, I imported the image sequence into After Effects. And by the way, I don't think I told you this yet. I always use EXR to render my image sequences. So here under Save File, I would just do, .exr, open EXR. And for the setup, I can either do full float, 32-bit or 16-bit. I usually do 32 just because it gives me more flexibility in post. So this is the Z-depth pass. You can see that it basically gives you values from white to black depending on how far objects are from the camera. And we can use this to create a sort of a fake shallow depth of field using this. And this was the raw render of just the water flow. So let me import that shot and make a new composition. And then let's drag the Z-depth right under that. So we have it right there. You can turn off the Z-depth. We don't really need to see it. You can select the main water layer. And I'm using this Frischluft depth of field plugin. So for the depth layer, we're going to select Z-depth. I like to uncheck the gamma correction because it sometimes just creates these white fringes, which I don't like. And you can just raise the radius and you can see how it gets blurry. And you can click select depth and select basically where the water is as your target depth that is in focus, and everything else is sort of out of focus. And you can crank this up all the way up. So you can see you get this super sort of shallowy depth of field, but I like to make it subtle, kind of keep it realistic, keep it grounded. And then you can go under Effect, Color Correction, Curves, give it some curves as usual, just to add some contrast. So already this is looking pretty nice. And one last touch is you can go under Effect, Effect, Stylize, Glow. So I like to add a little bit of glow just to the most bright areas, just to sort of create this bloom in the camera. So for the radius, we can raise that. For the threshold, so you can make the threshold almost 100% because it should be very subtle. So if I turn it on and off, you just get a little bit of it in the brightest areas, and you can play with the radius and you can lower the intensity like that. So now you have a little bit of sort of bloom happening in the brightest areas, which is a nice touch. And then if you would like, you can do Control Y to create a new solid, make it black. All right, so After Effects crashed on me, of course, but as I was saying, I just made a black solid and applied the optical flares from Video Copilot to it. So I have this basic flare in the corner to, add a little bit of interest to the shot. So this is the shot. I hope that you guys feel comfortable now in creating this on your own, please try this. I would love to see your results. This is definitely something that you can do even if you are a complete beginner. And I think it's pretty cool. It's a very nice starting point if you're getting into liquid simulations. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this. This is only the beginning of this course. We have so much more to do, and I'll see you in the next lesson.